You're not going to hear this perspective very much in the mainstream media. There has been now an ongoing real effort pushed by none other than Taylor Lorenz over at the Washington Post, but widespread in its want amongst, the so-called internet censors and their hall monitors at major mainstream media institutions who have been trying and actively campaigning Apple to take, and Google, by the way, to take Twitter off of the App Store. Let's put this up there on the screen. And it really broke a couple of days ago with a quote from a so-called expert in the Washington Post. Quote, they say Apple and Google need to seriously explore booting Twitter off of the App Store. What Musk is doing is existentially dangerous for various marginalized communities. It is like opening the gates of hell. I also do love how he did not need to specify. He just said, quote, various marginalized communities. This is Alejandra Caraballo of Harvard Law's Cyber Law Clinic, which is the fakest title that I have personally ever heard in academia. But look, you're reading through, and you and I were talking about this before the show. This news article written by Taylor Lorenz at the Post is titled, quote, Opening the Gates of Hell, Musk says he will revive banned Twitter accounts. It reads like an op-ed asking Apple and Google to take the Twitter off of the App Store. This is none other than an activist op-ed masquerading as a news article. I, unlike these people, think you are free to say what you want. Write an op-ed, but don't masquerade as news. This is appearing in the technology section of the website, Krystal.
I shouldn't be surprised at this point, but I continue to be surprised. I mean, I read through this article and I thought, surely, okay, you lead with the expert who was allowed to think whatever they think. You lead with the expert opinion. Surely you're going to have someone, maybe 3 paragraphs in who has the opposite take of like, oh, actually, this could be good. And here's the arguments in favor of free speech. And yes, it gets messy. The old ACLU position. No. Totally one-sided. It's just person after person after person with quotes very similar to this. And yeah, that's fine. If you're writing a monologue for a show, that's your opinion. Or if you're writing an op-ed for the very important large newspaper that a lot of people read and get their views from. I find it astonishing, not that she would write this piece, but I continue to find it shocking that the Washington Post allows this. Just blatant, one-sided opinion masquerading as neutral journalism is, I will never stop being sort of stunned by that. And that really is my issue with her. Again, you can have whatever opinions you want, you can say whatever you want, but to masquerade as this is neutral journalism, just the facts, it's gross.
Yeah, it is gross. And I want to bring it back to, actually, it's funny. Anybody who's ever tried to buy anything, in store, if you want to buy, I use a lot of Audible credits, right, to listen to audiobooks. You can't buy new credits in the Audible app. Why? Because they don't want to pay the tithe to the App Store. They make you buy it elsewhere and then buy with credits. Why do you think that whole system exists? It's literally to get around the App Store's tithing.
Well, and the only reason they're able to do it is because Amazon, which owns Audible, is its own monopoly. So we have no choice. They're like, all right, well, we'll go through their process and deal with their thing. The only reason they're able to push back and do it their way is because they're also gigantic monopoly.
So it's to even see that Bezos' own paper is advocating for a system of which he actively has to circumvent for his own business is just so particularly juicy. You referenced that op-ed, if we could put it back up there on the screen, because the Yoel Roth op-ed is important because Yoel previously was a Democratic operative before he was the head of trust and safety at Twitter. And really, the opening of the App Store conversation, while revealing to us from an analytical point of view, it is now being seen really as kind of an opening campaign. This was a preview to the executives at Apple and to really the activists, which is why they're seizing on it, because they're like, oh, this is a major opening. We can actually pressure Apple to just kick them off, which literally would be an existential threat. There's a book called Super Pumped, which I read. It was called The Battle for Uber. And one of the most interesting points within the book is the battle between Uber and Apple. Over the amount of information that Uber was able to collect about you on your phone. And there was all kinds of insane ways and code that went into people's apps and geofencing. I encourage people to go read it because it's actually an interesting kind of corporate story.
There were scandals in the beginning of them tracking journalists, and it was it was crazy.
Yeah, that's what happened is that they basically put a geofence around Cupertino, and they were like, well, we'll have one app that exists over there, and then one one app that exists in the rest of the world.
Oh my
so it would pass review, but then wouldn't go into effect elsewhere. And they had an entire software system. It's a fascinating book. They also made a Showtime movie about it. Not as good, but it's
really
all right.
something.
Super pumped. Everybody go and check it out. The point is that it just shows you again that Uber, which was a multi-billion-dollar corporation, itself was having to play crazy games and spend hundreds of millions of dollars trying to circumvent the Apple App Store so that they could continue to do business. I also want to underscore what you said earlier about these advertisers. Let's put the Business Insider tear sheet up there on the screen, please. And it shows you that 50 of Twitter's top 100 advertisers so far have pulled out of the platform since Musk took over. And as you said, part of the problem is that these 50 companies have spent over $2 billion in the last 2 years. Musk is, of course, saying that they're against free speech and all that. I think it's certainly possible, but he did himself no favors on two fronts. Number one, that initial Paul Pelosi tweet floating the conspiracy, that was a massive mistake because it just showed that since all editorial standards are up to him and he doesn't have particularly good editorial standards, well, that's just not going to be trustworthy on top of a major undeniable activist campaign against, basically against Elon right now, getting these Twitter advertisers to stop with him. So it's a combination of he didn't even give them a plausible deniability about how he's trying. And at the same time, Twitter Blue was a disaster. Allegedly, by the way, it's supposed to roll out tomorrow. I haven't seen a single announcement about that. So who knows when it's coming.
Yeah.
He's changed things up and said we'll have different types of check marks and all that stuff that's coming. Well, we'll see. But the business itself of Twitter, it's actually in danger right now.
In bad shape. Because they were getting like 90% of their revenue from advertisers. Previously, it was like, their exclusive source of revenue. Obviously, the new efforts to have more like subscription style revenue, those have not come to fruition yet. So they're in a major hole. And I do want to point out, like, activists, part of their free speech is being able to call on these companies to abandon the platform. And by the way, I don't think most of these companies needed much encouragement because there are a lot of places to advertise. And you look at the really chaotic decision-making. You look at the fact that, things that he said he was going to do, he then immediately reverses. I mentioned the Content Moderation Council. That gets thrown out the window. Then it's like ruled by Twitter poll. Then it's, the Twitter checkmark thing is rolled out. It's pulled back. I mean, it's just a total, all the parody accounts that sprung up when we had a minute where you could pay $8 to get your check mark and whatever. All these companies, I'm sure they're looking at this and like, we don't need this right now. Maybe we'll come back later, but we have a lot of places we could spend our advertising dollars. Yes. We read the analysis of one of the people who was like basically in charge of placing ads for a significant sized company. And they said another thing that people are discounting is because you have such staff turnover, they had a whole bunch of different people in the course of like 2 weeks who were assigned to their account. So they're just like, no, we're out. That's not a war on free speech. That's just business people making business decisions, which, I don't always love either. And I do think it's bad that these platforms have their entire content moderation policy essentially dictated to them by what corporate America is comfortable with. That is a major problem. But this is 100% predictable, completely predictable.
No, he made a mistake, and look, I support free speech on Twitter. I absolutely support even the revival of some banned accounts just because I don't think it should be within the power.
I support President Trump being unbanned. I mean, I don't really enjoy having his obnoxious voice around, but I think it's the right decision.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, look, it's not always comfortable to live in a free speech and open society, but having lived in the alternative, I will take this any day of the week.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now. And Saagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us. And if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.